in studio right now with two accomplished officials at the high school level, Joe Rusch and Scott Jones. And we're talking a little bit off the break about what took place in Alton. And Scott, I asked you if you had ever experienced anything like what took place at Alton High School. You said no. Joe, have you ever been in a tense situation? Maybe not to that magnitude, but...
Pretty close to that. I had two fights, one in a varsity girls basketball game, which was actually after the game in the girls. It was... without going into the schools, it was a private school against a public school, which were rivals from the same area, and they were going through the lines high-fiving after the game, and one girl decided to throw a punch, and a melee just ensued. It was crazy.
What'd you do?
I ran around blowing my whistle like that was going to matter. I was just trying to separate.
It's harder when the game is over, too.
Yeah, and I was literally walking off the court, and I just felt like I should, and, I don't know if it was the right thing or not. The other was in a football game where it was just a kind of a big pile of players near the sideline, and we're blowing it dead, and all of a sudden, a guy came off the sideline, a player that wasn't involved, and when he came onto the field, my only thought was, I'm going to get him. And he came into the pile, and I literally grabbed him by the jersey, and then the pile of players went down, and I was underneath 8 or 10 guys. And my crew out there listening right now are laughing because my hat's kind of cockeyed, and I'm laying on the ground. And I get that kid, and I wrap my legs around him at the bottom of the pile because he's the one who started the whole thing.
You knew.
I knew it. I wanted to at least eject him from the game. And it was funny because after the pile was done, the coach was like, what happened? And I said, this guy right here, 67, started. He goes, he doesn't even play. He was on the sidelines and just decided to get involved in the action. And then once one thing happens, as you could see in that video, unfortunately, it's like a tinderbox. One little thing happens, it just...
Did you get credit for a sack after that? Did you put that in your calendar, your stats for the
year? 2 points for a takedown.
There's law and order episodes about how people respond in mob situations. And a lot of these things, if two people are engaged, it's just sometimes in your mentality to go out and, if you're a kid, to go off the bench to help your friend. And then the other people come off the bench to help their friends. Then their uncle in the stand sees, oh, I'm not going to beat my son up or my nephew up. Then he comes out. And then that person's coming. Before you know it, you have a melee that if you could had any instinct inside of you that you could just diffuse. But again, it's that whole, I have to get, it's like anytime there's a fight in school, wherever it is, everybody will drop whatever they're doing to go run and see the fight. And that's not a cultural thing. That is any school USA.
Sure.
If there's a fight, there was a great movie, 3 o'clock high. Guess what? Everybody was outside in the parking lot waiting to see big kid fight little kid because there's going to be a fight. And that's just what people do. It's the mob mentality. And once it starts, if you do not have institutional control, it's going to get out of control. And a lot of that stuff, like we were just talking about earlier, can be nipped in the bud early in the game. If officials deal with issues the moment they come up, a lot of that stuff can be diffused. But if you don't, and you let it fester, and then, by the third quarter you decide, I'm finally tired of it, and I'm going to, then it's too late.
And it's the coaches, too. I had a playoff game this season where I had the head coach say to me before the game of a very respected program here in St. Louis, so she'll go nameless. He said to me, if you have a problem with any of my kids, you tell me, and I'll take care of it. During the game, we had a player of his who I talked to after an extra point who was all mad. And as he walked off, he gave it an MFGD as he's walking away from me. So that's an unsportsmanlike act. As he's walking to the sideline, I'm going to the coach. All of a sudden, I see the kid taking his jersey off and his helmet off on the sidelines. And I ran over to the coach and said, hey, coach, just so you know, we called a unsportsmanlike on 27. He's not ejected. He goes, yes, he is. And I said, no, sir, he's not. And he goes, no, I ejected him. He won't play anymore today. Because he heard what he said. So that was great. A lot of coaches some coaches would go back to what Scotty said. They'd be like, well, what did you say to him? What did I say to him? like what did you do to cause him to do that? And I'm like, and this coach handled it perfectly.
I think, for me, if I've done, if I'm officiating or if I'm watching officials, the way that I am at peace in handling these more tense situations is to understand that in most cases, in a game where you get to go do the game and you leave and people don't even recognize that you were there. That's the best. That's the dream for the official, is that you're reacting to everything. If something happens, you have to respond. It's your job. You don't want to be in there making things happen, but you got to keep your eyes peeled at all times. And, you said, Joe, or Scott, you said something about a kid sees a fight and they want to get in there. you said an important word in that sentence, and it's a kid. That kid has probably, at minimum, 3 figures of authority in that gym at that time that are supposed to have learned all these lessons now since they're adults. They've got coaches, they've got parents, they've got officials, all these people who are supposed to confine these people inside the boundaries that exist in your home, in your school, and on the basketball court or on the football field. How are we doing right now as a culture when it comes to the kid that pops off? But your example of the coach taking that kid out of the game is a perfect example of a lesson that kid gets to learn when he's a kid and not when he's 20 on the streets getting pulled over by a cop and taken to jail. Learn that lesson now. That's why sports is great. It teaches you so many lessons. How are we doing right now as a culture teaching these kids these lessons?
I'd say 90+% of sports programs and coaches and the whole infrastructure of a coaching and school districts do a fantastic job. You don't hear about, you're not stepping over bodies going to basketball games. You hear about the Alton incident. That doesn't happen every day. It doesn't even happen every week. And chances are, because of the magnitude of that, it may not happen again.
Yeah.
Because most school districts, I'm going to give credit to a school district that gets a very bad rap, but you never hear about stuff that happens in those schools, and that's the Hazelwood School District. If you work,
Tony Colombo pay you to say that. That's where he is. That's where he is.
The one game Scotty and I worked together in football. He filled on my crew. We did the Hazelwood. We can mention this because it was good.
Yeah.
Hazelwood Central, Hazelwood West. It was a very heated game. They ended up having to play it on a Monday afternoon for some other reasons. And it was one of the best.
Outside of the school, not in the school.
One of the best sportsmanship games I had all season.
If you attend a Hazelwood sporting event and you get and a parent or a kid gets out of line, they have the best security system you could ever dream about in a school district. That child, parent, cousin, uncle, whoever will be immediately removed from the situation. They'll either do it on their own or they'll do it on our word. And I'm going to say that because, again, that's a district that gets a bad rap about, security,
Testify.
blah, blah, blah. Testify. There are several districts and I'm just saying, that's most districts USA. You don't hear about that a lot. But to your point, again, if the kid's entitled, guess what? He thinks he's Teflon. He can do whatever he wants because he's not going to like you said, some coaches give you a technical foul, you're done. Or you get an unsportsmanlike, you're done. Other guys, that's my star. I'm putting him back in the game.
You ever see the punk kid on the floor and quickly identify who that punk kid's parents are?
100%. Because that's the loudest, most obnoxious. I think my kid's going to be LeBron James person in the building. And he's so disappointed when his kid doesn't even make his 9th grade team.
But that's one thing that's changed over the years is we've known officials who used to throw parents out with regularity. And we won't mention any names. But now we're not even allowed to do that. We're told, the administrator, so if like I'm going to be at Hancock this Friday night, if I have a problem with a fan, Hancock has an administrator on site. I go to the Hancock administrator and I say, that fan over there in the yellow shirt, we're not going to continue the game until they leave. And then they handle it because it's not something we should have to deal with. Now, we don't take that lightly. I've never, in 26 years of basketball, never had to throw out a fan. I've thrown out a coach, but never have had to throw out a fan. But it could happen at any time.
Yeah,
and I've thrown out plenty of parents, and because the guy always sits on the front row, and he's easy to find. If you're up in the stands, it's
he
hard
actually
to find.
thinks he's in the game.
He thinks he's in the game.
He's going to score points.
And what I'll do, I'll give him a chance. I'll stop and say, look, please don't make me embarrass you in front of your family and friends. And then they keep on. I will stop the game as loud as I can say, Mr. Administrator, will you please come over here and remove this person from this game so we can continue? And then I'll stand. And 9 times out of 10, it's a standing ovation because the parents want him gone too.
They endure it every game.
They endure it every game.
Did you have a question you wanted to ask? Did we get
what I'd like to know what you guys think is the number one influencer of bad behavior on the court. Is it the parents, the bad parents that we've talked about?
100%.
Yeah.
100%. A jerk kid usually has a jerk for a parent. I can't make it any plainer than that.
I'd say absolutely a big part of it, but I think it's watching the college and the pro. These kids watch it and then they replicate it. And in high school, it's much more strict, like an unsportsmanlike foul. Again, in that same playoff game I had where kids like to do the jumping chest bump after a touchdown, which I will give them 1, maybe 2.
No bob and weave, though.
But no, what the other one they like to do, and you'll see it in college and pros, is the little guy, the little wide receiver, jumps into the lineman's arms and then he holds him up over his head.
Yeah.
Oh my God.
And in high school, for me, that happens. That's unsportsmanlike because
planned.
it's planned, and it's all about drawing attention. And if you read the rule, it's all I shouldn't draw attention to me. But I called that, and the coach said, "We've never had that called on us. It's happened before." The player was very apologetic as soon as I threw the flag.
But now he knows.
I'm sorry, sir. I didn't know that. But that's a consistency thing on officials. We need to be able to know that, hey, if this happens, this is the consequence.
And we can leap to the college ranks real quick, which I do in football. In the world of tightening all that bad behavior up, I'm sure you all heard the word targeting and all that kind of stuff. Well, guess what? If you hit a player in the head illegally, they throw you out of the game now.
Yeah.
They're trying to get all that violence out of the game. If you get 2 unsportsmanlike conduct penalties in a game, you are removed from the game. So as far as behavior during a college football game in the last few years, you're talking about cleaned up.
Yeah.
Because penalizing somebody for a game, that's a big deal. We only played 10 of them or 11. And if we went, and again, you said, how do you curtail some of this stuff in high school sports? Guess what? Have some consequences to your actions. If you mess up and it's proven to be your fault, lose games. But then again, if you take somebody, then the parent wants to come have a court hearing as why my son is not playing this week because I've got a scholarship on the line, and if he doesn't play, the scouts won't see him. Yeah, you're in the 7th grade. Nobody cares.
You hear a lot of college coaches too, and I'm trying to think off the top of my head which ones. I think it was college basketball, but was just talking about how they will not sign kids because their parents are nuts. And then when they're doing recruiting and they see parents who are like super over aggressive about what Johnny's going to get to do and what they're going to do for Johnny, their coaches are like, no, we don't need this.
They don't want to deal
absolutely.
with
But when these college recruiters come, like last year I had a game where there was a recruiter, the main recruiter from the University of Oklahoma, which is a prize program. Well, all the players, he was coming to see one player on this team. Well, every other player on that team that night was on fire because why? He's like, here's the guy who could give me my break, so he's going to try to do everything they can that night to be noticed, and that can cause difficulties.
Right. Coaches look at social media. If you're a jerk on there's so many good players that's the kind of thing that can get you eliminated out of the race. If you have bad behavior, like you just talked about, if you're put crazy stuff on your Facebook page, if they'll go and ask your teachers and then you're a jerk in the classroom, they will go right by you to the next kid because there's really not that big a difference between good players.
Yeah.
Player that's good with a good attitude is going to get a break. The kid, YMCA is full of fantastic Michael Jordans that are there because of their attitudes.
What YMCA are you going to?
One right around the corner.
I've been watching 8-year-olds play YMCA basketball, and I'm
talking about adults.
Oh, yeah,
guys
that's true.
that were great when they were
Yeah,
kids, but
that's true.
oh man, if I would have got a break, I didn't, and they're like, well, guess what? If you'd have shut up, you might have got that break.
Yeah, that's so true. Well, thank you guys so much for coming in here. It's great to have you in. And
We're done.
well, here's one other thing. Let's see. Let's take a quick break. When we come back, I want to talk about some of these other. You got a stack of papers in front of you.
Okay.
This isn't specific to Alton, Riverview Gardens, any of the unnamed places that we've discussed here in our long list of experiences that we've had. But when we come back, let's talk about some solutions that you guys have in mind, because I bet you have some solutions in mind.
I bet we do too.
All right, we'll be right back.
Around the house.